So there's this new law in Israel that's really stirring things up on the world stage. And it's forcing a really tough question. Is it time for the world to impose sanctions? In this explainer, we're going to break down what this law is, how the world is reacting, and the huge debate over what should happen next.
And get this isn't some hypothetical question. It's the exact problem world leaders are wrestling with right now. It really sets the stage for this massive clash between, moral outrage and cold, hard geopolitical reality.
Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll dig into the law itself, then the global reaction. After that, we'll look at the arguments for and against sanctions, and we'll finish up by looking at this standoff between just talking and actually doing something.
All right, so first up, what's all the fuss about with this new law? Well, the controversy really boils down to a pretty simple idea. The same crime getting two very, very different punishments. It's called the death penalty bill. And put simply, it introduces the death penalty, but specifically for Palestinians convicted of terrorism. And right there, that's where the issue of discrimination becomes impossible to ignore.
And this is the part that's just so stark. For the exact same crime, terrorism, the punishment is decided by your nationality. A Palestinian offender could face the death penalty. An Israeli offender would get a prison sentence. It's this two-tiered system that has absolutely ignited an international firestorm.
And yeah, that firestorm was immediate. The law was met with this just swift, unified course of condemnation from some of the world's most powerful institutions.
The United Nations did not mince words at all. Its human rights chief said that if this law were applied in occupied territory, it wouldn't just be illegal, it would constitute a war crime. I mean, that is exceptionally strong language on the world stage. And it wasn't just the UN. The European Union was right there with them, calling the law a step backwards and flat out labeling it a discriminatory bill. This really shows you the concern isn't isolated. It's shared by a huge bloc of Western nations.
But then the language got even more charged. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, directly used the word apartheid, suggesting this law is part of a much bigger system of segregation. And that comparison has since become a major part of this whole debate.
Okay, so you've got these huge, loaded terms being thrown around. War crime, discriminatory, apartheid. It naturally shifts the focus from just talking about the law to a much tougher question: what should the world actually do about it?
And that brings us right to the heart of this whole debate: sanctions. People who support them are arguing that, look, words just aren't cutting it anymore, and that real, tangible pressure is the only way to make Israel change course.
So the case for sanctions really stands on four main pillars. First, as the UN pointed out, it's a violation of international law. Second, it's clearly institutionalized discrimination. Third, it violates human rights promises that are part of existing agreements between the EU and Israel. And finally, there's the argument that, hey, if talking doesn't work, sanctions are the next logical tool.
And that idea taps into some really powerful history. You have prominent figures like Scotland's former First Minister Humza Yousaf making this direct historical comparison. He's saying the same kind of international pressure that helped end apartheid in South Africa should be used here.
But, it's never that simple, is it? The path to actually implementing sanctions is incredibly complicated. So let's flip the coin and look at the case against sanctions, which is really less about morality and more about the messy realities of global politics.
So those who are against sanctions, they bring up four big issues. First, Israel's a major strategic ally for the West. Think intelligence, military tech. Second, imposing sanctions could cause a huge economic and diplomatic backlash. Third, there are real worries that sanctions might not even work. They could just make things worse. And maybe the biggest hurdle of all, there's just no international agreement to move forward.
Which brings us to where we are right now, stuck. There's this massive gap between what the world is saying and what it's actually doing, or not doing. And the result is a total diplomatic stalemate.
You can really break it down like this. On one side, you've got a ton of soft action, all these diplomatic statements, tons of condemnation. But on the other side, the hard action, economic sanctions, is completely stalled. There's just no consensus to make it happen.
And this isn't just theory, This actually happened. Just recently, a proposal was brought to the EU to sanction some far-right Israeli ministers. And it failed. It couldn't get the unanimous vote it needed, with countries like Hungary reportedly blocking it. That's geopolitical reality in action, right there.
So we're left right back where we started with this incredibly tricky question. In a world tangled up in strategic alliances and economic interests, how does the global community actually cross the line from just condemning something to imposing a real consequence?
Right now, nobody seems to know where that line is, leaving a controversial law in place and a world completely divided on what to do next.